Welcome back to the new of this family. Today's video is more than just a story, it's a reflection of the struggles, resilience, and strength of our community. Every view, every like, and every share helps amplify the voices that history has tried to silence. Together, we're not just watching, we're standing up against racism and injustice. Thank you for being here and for being part of this movement. Let's dive in. Asterisk, 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 hold at Gate 17. Dorian Brant arrived at JFK's Terminal 4 just as the sun began to cast pale light across the concourse windows. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass wall showed a man accustomed to controlled mornings. Charcoal gray suit impeccably pressed, collar crisp, tie knotted with effortless precision. In his left hand, he carried a dark leather garment bag that held his keynote notes and a change of shirt. In his right, a first-class boarding pass bound for San Francisco. He moved through the subdued bustle of pre-dawn travelers' coffee cups clutched like lifelines. Suitcases rolling on silent wheels with the quiet confidence of someone who balanced early starts and late-night meetings as easily as breathing. At 58, Dorian had logged countless hours in airports. He never craved the spotlight. He preferred the clean efficiency of a well-oiled routine. But when he approached Gate 17, a sudden shift in the air told him something was off. A line to board hadn't yet formed. A few passengers hovered nearby, some scrolling on their phones, others nursing paper cups of steaming coffee. He stepped up to the desk, nodded politely to the young woman seated behind the counter, and offered his pass. She glanced down, then up at his face, her gaze lingering longer than etiquette dictated. Her fingers hovered over the scanner, but didn't press. He waited, posture relaxed, eyes calm. "Premium passengers only," she said, her voice clipped. Dorian's expression didn't waver. He tucked his phone into his breast pocket and replied, in even tones, "Yes, I'm aware." He lifted the boarding pass, tilted it so the light caught the hologram. Seat 1A. The agent blinked, then looked down again, slower this time, as if she hoped the paper might transform into something else. Behind her, a colleague leaned forward, whispering into her ear. The gate agent straightened, cleared her throat. "I'm going to need to see some ID." He inclined his head, mildly curious. "You don't usually ask for ID at boarding." She blushed slightly. "Just a security measure." She tapped her headset.
"Please, hold here."
Dorian produced his wallet and handed over his license. She took it awkwardly, placing it on the counter without scanning it. He noticed the hesitation in her shoulders, the way she glanced toward the terminal entrance, as if looking for reinforcement. Within seconds, a uniformed security officer strode over, boots clicking on the linoleum. He planted himself beside Dorian, arms folded, eyes cold and calculating. In that moment, Dorian recognized the old pattern. Professionalism giving way to suspicion the instant someone decided he didn't belong. Not because of anything he'd said or done, simply because they couldn't imagine a man who looked like him in first class. Okay. He backed away from the desk, moving to a spot just outside the boarding lane. his hands sliding into his pockets. He had no intention of arguing. He would not raise his voice. He would not provide the performance they demanded. He reached into his pocket, thumbed his phone free, and made a single call. It rang once, twice, then connected. "Maggie, it's me." His voice was calm, measured. "Please pull up the contract." "We signed with Horizon Air 2 weeks ago the Western Routes catering agreement. I'm at gate 17. Hold." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, eyes fixed on a distant point beyond the glass wall. The gate agent cleared her throat into the microphone. "We're working through a minor issue. Thank you for your patience." Her words floated out to the growing cluster of passengers now lining up. Behind her, first class and premium lanes stood empty. The rest of the concourse buzzed with confusion. A man in a gray pullover leaned forward. "Is there a problem with this guy?" Dorian heard the whisper, but didn't turn. He folded his arms, breathing evenly. He didn't need allies. His work spoke for him. When Maggie's voice came back on the line, crisp and professional, "Got it. Want me to call corporate?" He replied softly, "Flag it. I think they're about to recognize a problem." Then he ended the call. Moments later, the agent's colleague peeked over, curiosity etched on her face. The security guard remained silent, eyes fixed on Dorian as though ticking boxes on an internal checklist. Dorian continued to stand with serene composure, his gaze sweeping the terminal's high vaulted ceiling, the rows of empty seats, the distant runway beyond the terminal's glass. It wasn't long before the hum of conversation shifted. Like a gate. Agent's voice quivered as she announced, "If you're in first class, please remain seated behind me." Her colleagues exchanged furtive glances. From somewhere behind, a supervisor's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Status." "Under control," she replied, eyes darting back to Dorian. "Be sure it stays that way," came the clipped response. Dorian leaned back on one leg, silent and still. He recalled the soft floorboards of his childhood home in Mansfield, Ohio, and the louder mornings sorting produce in his mother's grocery store. He remembered how she taught him to identify a ripe melon by its texture, how to spot a spoiled apple from 10 feet away. And most importantly, how to talk with people, not at them. The lesson had shaped him far more than any business school. Lecture. At 23. He'd launched a roadside stand outside Columbus with nothing but a borrowed truck, a canvas tent, and unwavering resolve. He didn't need employees. He sold sweet corn like gold. In his 30s, he recognized the potential for large-scale, sustainably grown regional produce. And Brant Global Foods was born in a rented garage with one delivery route and a temperamental laptop. Over 15 years, he built a network of farmers, grocery chains, and university dining halls. Horizon Air had come to him after a wave of negative press and passenger complaints about in-flight meals. He'd listened rather than pitched, then delivered a plan. Seasonal rotations, direct farm sourcing, waste cutting, packaging. They signed the $1.48 million contract to transform their western routes. But today, gate agent's unspoken assumptions had eclipsed all that. He shifted his weight again, closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, the security guard flinched at the calm determination in Dorian's gaze. The gate agent edged closer, as if expecting him to explode. Instead, he stepped back, checked his watch, and tapped his foot softly. He wasn't angry, he was resolute. Finally, the gate agent swallowed, raised her scanner, and with a mechanical beep, processed his pass. Relief rippled through the small audience of onlookers. First-class passengers began to gather, murmuring apologies to him as they passed. The security guard unhooked himself and melted into the background. Dorian nodded once, tucked his pass into his pocket, and picked up his garment bag. He walked across the threshold, cast one last glance at the empty lane where he'd been held, and continued down the jet bridge. Behind him, the gate agent sank onto a stool, head in her hands. But Dorian didn't look back. He had a plane too, catch, a summit to address, and a quiet statement made in the only way he knew how, by refusing to perform indignation, and instead letting his composure speak volumes. Roots of Resilience. Dorian Brant's story began long before jet bridges and keynote addresses in a modest blue house on Maple Street in Mansfield, Ohio, where dawn arrived not as a gentle suggestion but as an imperative. He was 5 when his mother, Eunice, wove his small hand into hers each morning before sunrise and led him down a quiet block to her neighborhood grocery. In the back room, under the buzz of fluorescent tubes, Dorian learned the unglamorous art of produce care. He sorted bushels of peaches by firmness and hue, examined apples for the slightest bruise, and arranged slender crates of leafy greens with deliberate care. Eunice showed him that every bruise, every misstep, rippled outward. Today's oversight could mean tomorrow's spoiled fruit and tomorrow's disappointed customer. From the earliest moments, he absorbed a simple truth. Excellence in small tasks lays the foundation for lasting trust. By the time Dorian was 15, Saturday mornings felt less like leisure and more like a continuation of his responsibility. While his peers slept in, he was already tying his shoelaces in the dim light of the back room. He rang up customers, hefted heavy boxes, and greeted familiar faces by name. Over the steady hum of refrigerators, he practiced engaging strangers. In meaningful conversation, planning Sunday's family dinner, he'd ask, or, "Is that dessert peach pie I see in your basket?" His mother's wisdom echoed every time he cracked a warm smile. Speak with people, not at them. He learned that listening was as vital as speaking. Remembering a customer's favorite apple variety could transform a routine trip to the grocery into a moment of real connection. When regulars praised the sweetness of his berries or the crispness of his grapes, Dorian felt a swell of pride, as though he had personally orchestrated something extraordinary in every sale. College at Kent State University expanded his vision far beyond the confines of that small grocery. Enrolling in agricultural business, he immersed himself in supply chain theory, sustainable farming methods, and market analysis. He volunteered for campus-run community gardens, organized seminars on composting techniques, and interned with a regional agronomist learning integrated pest management that reduced chemical use. Dorian even spearheaded a student initiative to convert unused campus land into living demonstration plots, teaching peers about crop rotation, soil composition, and biodiversity in practice, not just in textbooks. For all the data charts and lectures, he never forgot his mother's lessons, the weight of a perfectly ripe melon in his palm, the satisfying snap of a fresh green bean, and the careful inspection that preceded every harvest. After graduation, Dorian returned to Ohio, determined to bridge theory and reality. He launched his first venture, a roadside produce stand just outside Columbus. Each morning before dawn, he rolled out a sturdy canvas tent on a rented gravel lot, piled wooden crates with seasonal corn, tomatoes, and peaches, and drove his uncle's weathered pickup to nearby family farms to handpick the day's bounty. By 7 a.m., the first customers arrived. Neighbors, commuters, and early-rising food enthusiasts drawn by word of mouth. Dorian learned the rhythms of customer demand, how a sudden heat wave could double corn sales, or how a weekend market folded when a thunderstorm loomed. He kept a dog-eared notebook detailing which items flew off the crates, which packaging resonated straw baskets for berries, perforated boxes for greens, and when late afternoon traffic slowed to a trickle, he offered discounts to minimize waste. Those early years taught him inventory forecasting, the importance of supplier relationships, and the art of adjusting on the fly. In his 30s, Dorian recognized a compelling market gap. Large grocery chains depended on produce shipped hundreds of miles, treated for durability, and packaged in plastic for shelf-lived fanned consumers. Increasingly health and sustainability-minded were dissatisfied. He imagined scaling his roadside model into a regional distribution network, delivering high-quality, locally sourced produce to grocery chains, university cafeterias, and corporate dining services without sacrificing freshness or traceability. He founded Brant Global Foods in a rented Dayton garage, armed with a single delivery route and a temperamental laptop. The first contract was modest, a nearby natural food store willing to take a chance on his farm-to-shelf promise. That small deal was a lifeline. It kept his rented freezer humming through the first winter and funded the first proper delivery van, building the supplier. Network demanded more than logistics. It demanded empathy. Dorian spent long afternoons traversing dusty county roads, sitting beside farmers in sagging pickup cabs as they discussed their anxieties over volatile crop prices. He offered guaranteed minimum volumes to protect against market dips and structured payment schedules that helped cover planting costs in spring. In exchange, he coordinated with local distributors to shuttle crates swiftly from barns to store, loading docks-ventilated plastic containers for delicate berries, insulated boxes for greens, and sturdy woven baskets for root vegetables. Word of his reliability spread. Farmers began referring neighbors, and small chains trusted his deliveries even before receiving an invoice. Impressed by his transparent process and shared commitment to quality, when Horizon Air reached out amid headlines about bland in-flight meals and waste-packed carts. Dorian flew to Seattle ready to listen, not to pitch, behind the glossy boardroom table. Horizon's executives described spoiled shipments on long routes, passenger complaints about limp salads, and spiraling disposal costs. Dorian asked granular questions. Which flights suffered the most spoilage? What seasonal rotations aligned with regional tastes? Over the next weeks, he designed a phased rollout, implement rotating seasonal produce sourced from Midwest farms, introduce crush-resistant cold packs to preserve crispness, and run systematic waste audits to measure improvement. Pilot plan promised reduced spoilage, richer menus, and half the waste within a single quarter. Horizon signed a $1.48 million agreement to pilot the initiative. Despite the contract's scale, Dorian's humility never wavered. In Brant Global's Dayton headquarters, black and white photographs of his initial roadside stand hung beside. Heartfelt thank you letters from growers whose income stabilized under his model. The lobby lacked trophies or plaques. Instead, the walls featured framed family photos and milestone contracts, subtle reminders of where true value lies. He spent mornings fine-tuning delivery routes with Maggie, his logistics specialist, and afternoons on calls to secure new farm partnerships, forever focused on process over praise. Through every milestone, Dorian held fast to his mother's guiding principle: treat every person and product with respect. He believed that leadership flowed from service empowering farmers, nourishing communities, and fostering trust through consistent action. When he arrived at Gate 17 that morning, those early lessons steered his every move. Rather than confront or complain, he simply offered documentation. Rather than flare in anger, he remained graciously patient. His composure spoke as powerfully as any protest as he finally stepped onto the jet bridge bound for San Francisco. Dorian Brant glanced back once at the empty gate line where the incident had unfolded. He carried more than a garment bag and a keynote speech. He carried decades of lessons proving that true worth requires no proclamation. It reveals itself through quiet confidence, respectful conduct, and unwavering dedication to detail taught long ago under the hum of fluorescent lights. Corporate intervention. The moment Dorian Brant disappeared down the jet bridge, a silent ripple of urgency pulsed from Gate 17 through Horizon Air's regional operations office in Minneapolis. Cynthia Reyes, executive director of regional operations, sat hunched over her desk, half-eaten croissant in hand, and a quarterly report spread before her when her phone buzzed insistently. It was Maggie Geller, Dorian's assistant, and her tone crackled with the kind of controlled alarm that left no room for procrastination. "Cynthia, we have an incident," Maggie said. "Mr. Brant's being held at JFK Gate 17. Questioning his boarding pass and security's been called." Cynthia's blood ran cold. Horizon had just finalized the Brant Global Foods contract to reinvent every in-flight meal on Western routes, reduce waste, and highlight local producers. Months of planning, marketing teasers, video footage of farmers, and branded packaging. all hinged on Dorian arriving smoothly. He was being treated like a security threat. With her croissant abandoned on her desk, Cynthia leaped to her feet. "I'm on the next flight," she said. "Keep me posted." Within minutes, she had instructed her assistant to assemble a crisis team. Jack Renault, head of food service integration. Sean Torres, head of brand protection. And Elise Montgomery from legal. They assembled in a glass-walled conference room, overlooking the tarmac, eyes glued to terminal cameras and gate logs. "Why Gate 17? Jack demanded, pacing. "That's a first-class lane. Who authorized a security hold?" Elise flipped through electronic logs. T. No policy flag. No system-generated hold. It appears an agent manually initiated it. She frowned, and security was called without incident report. Frowned. "We risk looking incompetent, not discriminatory. This is a PR minefield." Cynthia, already on her way to the airport, spoke into her headset, marshalling her thoughts. "Get me everything on Dorian Brant, vendor file, resume photos, social media mentions, whatever we've got. I want to understand who he is before I approach." She toggled her GPS-enabled conference call to navigation, then closed her eyes. Reviewing the cadence of the incident, a polite man, his credentials unquestioned elsewhere, challenged only. At Gate 17. Meanwhile, Dorian had stepped onto the jet bridge and paused under the harsh fluorescent lights. Feeling the shift from suspicion back to routine, he watched the flight attendants prepare the cabin, methodical and composed as other passengers filed past in business suits and travel-worn jeans. He offered a slight nod to the lead attendant, Jordan, who lifted an eyebrow in recognition. She held his garment bag and gestured toward seat 1A as if apologizing with her silence. He accepted the bag wordlessly, then stowed his own carry-on in the overhead bin. Once he was settled, he observed the cabin crew as they performed there. Checks oxygen lines, exit signage, overhead bins, and he felt their sympathetic glances. He closed his eyes momentarily, inhaling the faint scent of recycled air and leather headrests. "Mr. Brant?" Jordan asked, her voice low. "They'll have you on your way in just a few minutes." He offered a polite thank you and turned, his gaze to the window. Beneath him, the concourse pulses with a new tension. Departures delayed, screens flashing operational hold, and passengers clustering around gate agents, phones raised, mouths moving. He tapped his watch twice, then exhaled. This, too, was part of the experience he intended to address in his keynote. How assumptions and biases derail systems built on efficiency. On the runway, Cynthia's wheels touched down at JFK. She disembarked. Swiftly, rose-stained heels clicking against the moving walkway, and sprinted into the terminal's chaos. Passengers hustled in both directions. 7 flights reported delays, including several Horizon departures. Her assistant appeared at her elbow, thrusting a tablet. "Here's the dossier you requested." Cynthia skimmed the screen. Dorian's childhood in Mansfield, the roadside stand, Kent State achievements, founding of Brant Global Foods. the Horizon contract proposal, articles praising his sustainable model. She scanned images of his family photos, his modest Dayton office, and the wedding portrait on his desk. There was no sign of arrogance, only quiet confidence and consistent track records. She nodded, turned to her assistant. "Take me to gate 17. They wove through security checkpoints, ID checks, bag scans, diverted lines, till the agent recognized Cynthia's Horizon credentials. "Ma'am, this way," she said, voice hushed with deference. Approaching gate 17, Cynthia took in the scene. An empty lane cordoned by stanchions, the gate agent's face buried in her hands, and security backed a few paces away. Dorian stood alone by the glass wall overlooking the runway, his posture relaxed yet alert. His suit jacket was draped over his arm, and his eyes were fixed on the distant horizon of parked aircraft. Cynthia inhaled deeply and walked forward. The moment she stood beside him, his expression softened ever so slightly. "Mr. Brant," she said. He turned. Recognition flickered in his eyes when he saw her Horizon badge. He inclined his head. "Ms. Reyes," she offered her hand. "On behalf of Horizon Air, I apologize for this morning's treatment. It should never have happened." She gestured to the gate agent. "May I speak with you privately?" He nodded, slipping his phone into his pocket. They stepped a few feet to the side, away from curious passengers. Cynthia spoke earnestly. "I know you have a critical engagement today. We value your partnership, and I'm committed to making this right. Do you know who you'll be seated among?" Dorian raised an eyebrow. "Seat 1A, he said softly. "First row," Cynthia nodded. "Of course, personally guarantee your boarding." She then watched him carefully, gauging whether he still felt aggrieved. She pressed on. "We're auditing our gate protocols and sensitivity training. We'll ensure no partner is ever detained again without documented cause." Kieran studied her. His calm had the weight of years spent diffusing tense situations with grace. "Ms. Reyes," he said, "I appreciate the apology, but the issue goes deeper than policy. It's about assumptions about reading people rather than listening." To them, Cynthia met his gaze. "You're absolutely right." He produced a slim manila folder from his garment bag and handed it to her. "Here is the signed contract. Our agreement to source, package, and deliver your region's farm-fresh produce." Okay, when you assume someone holding the contract keys doesn't belong, you question more than a boarding pass. Cynthia's fingertips brushed the contract's crisp cover as she took possession of it. She closed her eyes briefly. "Point taken." Dorian nodded once and tucked his folder away. "Thank you." Then, with unclenched jaw and unhurried stride, he turned and rejoined the boarding line as the gate agent finally scanned his pass. Jordan reappeared, water bottle in hand, and offered it to him. He accepted the bottle with a curt, "Thank you," and made his way into the cabin. Back in the terminal, Cynthia stood beside the gate desk as the first-class lane reopened. She watched passengers file through, their expressions shifting from annoyance to curiosity when they recognized the returning CEO of Brant Global Foods, Whispers followed in her wake, questions about who he was, why he was held, and how Horizon could let it happen. Within minutes, her assistant's phone buzzed with notifications. Internal systems hold on 6 flights. Crisis team mobilized, and regional VP inbound. Cynthia allowed herself a moment of relief as she motioned to her staff. Let's debrief. In conference room, be fast. On the tarmac, beyond the terminal windows, planes idling in queue. The ripples of one man's silent insistence grew into a corporate wave. Protocol revisions, diversity training, and a partnership with a advisory group to address bias. The contract's gentle reminder that dignity cannot be assumed now catalyzed real change. And somewhere above the Atlantic, Dorian Brant reclined in seat 1A, eyes closed, envisioning the summit stage where he would speak not of airport holds, but of systemic assumptions of how, in ease or adversity, resilience arises from quiet confidence and respect for every individual's narrative. The hum of engines under his window punctuated his contemplation. The next chapter awaited. Ripples across the terminal. The cabin door slid shut with a gentle hiss, and the engine's muted roar gradually filled the space around Dorian Brant's seat. He remained seated in 1A, his posture composed yet alert as the flight attendants conducted their safety checks. The tension in the cabin was almost palpable. Passengers tossed uneasy glances toward the gate area they'd just departed. Cabin crew exchanged hurried whispers, and monitors lining the aisles displayed nonchalant departure maps that belied the invisible drama behind the scenes. Jordan, the lead flight attendant who had offered Dorian his water bottle, moved down the aisle and paused at his seat. "Mr. Brant," she said softly, "thank you for your patience. They're still working through a terminal-wide hold. Keep you posted." Her voice held a sincerity that extended beyond professional courtesy. She, too, had witnessed the indignity of his detention. He nodded once, offering a brief smile of acknowledgement before turning his gaze back to the window. Below, the terminal lights flickered and the concourse hummed with activity, or rather, frustrated stasis. Electronic boards in the passenger area had flashed cryptic messages. "Operational hold, please stand by." "System review in progress." "Security assessment underway." A small crowd had gathered by the windows. Phones raised to capture the spectacle of aircraft queued at departure gates. Tail fins lined up like dominoes in the cabin. Murmurs rippled among first-class passengers. Some shifted in their seats to glimpse the terminal lights. Others unfolded newspapers or tapped on tablets, pretending that everything was proceeding according to plan. Yet every so often, a passenger would unconsciously glance toward Dorian's seat. Remembering his calm figure at the gate, phone pressed to his ear. A silent statement of authority. Dorian closed his eyes and reflected on how swiftly a single event can cascade through an organization. The gate agent's instincts, born of inexperience and unchecked bias, had triggered a security flag, which triggered a hold on the flight, which in turn triggered broader operational reviews across multiple gates. He pictured Cynthia Reyes hurrying through the terminal's maze-like corridors, rallying legal, HR, and brand teams. He imagined Jack Renault and Sean Torres convening at corporate headquarters in Minneapolis, poring over incident reports and crisis management playbooks. His thoughts drifted to the culture he had built at Brant Global Foods. He had never believed in top-down commands or rigid hierarchies. Instead, he had empowered farmers with flexible contracts, furnished employees with transparent data, and encouraged every team member to speak up when processes failed. He recalled a whiteboard session in his Dayton office last spring, where a young logistics coordinator pointed out a flaw in packaging labels. Rather than dismiss her, Dorian had invited her to redesign the workflow even after the new labeling system delayed $1 million shipment by 2 weeks. He saw great value in small voices raising big flags as the cabin crew continued their preparations. Dorian slipped on his noise-canceling headphones and dialed into the digital conference with Maggie. He swiped through the Horizon Air contract, documents, and internal communications pulled from his assistant's secure drive. Even in mid-flight, he could not help but monitor the progress of the incident. Maggie's calm voice crackled over the connection. Cynthia's reached the gate. She's reviewing the signed agreement now. Corporate has issued a temporary freeze on all Western route departures for additional flights on hold. He inhaled and steadily understood. Please confirm their polling gate logs, agent records, and any security call transcripts. Already in motion, Maggie replied. Legal is drafting an internal memo to reinforce policy. Only documented issues justify agent-initiated holds. HR is preparing a sensitivity training module. Good, he said. But make sure they address assumptions, not just procedures. The root cause isn't a missing checklist tits. People judging based on stereotypes. She hesitated, then responded, I'll flag it. The engine's hum intensified as the pilot announced pushback and taxi. Dorian removed one headphone and folded it on his lap. The seatbelt sign chimed, and the cabin crew took their seats. Through the window, he saw tug vehicles attached to the nose gear, slowly steering the plane away from the gate. The amber glow of runway lights guided them past the terminal silhouette where the hold had been enforced. During takeoff roll, a telelytic rush of acceleration pressed him into the seat cushion, and concrete runway gave way to open sky. Watch the terminal shrink beneath the wing's shadow, tracing the last lingering lights of Gate 17 before they slipped into clouded dusk. Once, at cruising altitude, Dorian reclined slightly and allowed himself a rare moment of introspection. His fingertips drummed lightly against his suit pocket, recalling the morning's tension as though reliving a distant memory. He pictured the gate agent, new to her role and unaware of the responsibility she wielded. He envisioned the silent security officer, eyes scanning tags without context. He felt a pang of empathy, for neither of them had prompted malice, but rather had succumbed to a default setting of doubt. His phone vibrated quietly in his pocket. He retrieved it and saw Maggie's text. Horizon's communication team is drafting a public statement. Plan to acknowledge the incident and announce training updates. No attribution to you. He typed a quick reply. Keep it concise, focus on company measures, not the individual. Let them lead with action. Right. Paused before hitting send. A public statement could diffuse the crisis, but he did not wish to become the face of an apology tour. His purpose was to highlight systemic change, how an organization learns from its blind spots rather than personal vindication. Jordan emerged from the galley with a cart of beverages, offering Dorian a selection of juice or sparkling water. She quietly mentioned, "Corporate just authorized us to serve first-class meals early. You have priority." He chose sparkling water and returned her nod with a polite, "Thank you." As she moved on, he unzipped his garment bag and retrieved his keynote packet, sleek black binder, embossed with the summit's logo. Inside lay his speech on resilience in the food supply chain. He flipped to the page titled Bias and the Supply Chain, where he had drafted a segment on reading soil composition, yet misreading human composition. He would close his talk with the phrase, "When we assume, we harvest nothing but regret." The meal service commenced, and the aroma of seasonal salad, heirloom tomatoes, microgreens, and herbed goat cheese drifted down the aisle. Passengers who recognized him offered discreet smiles. Others stole curious glances. He ate methodically, savoring the crispness that stood in stark contrast to the morning's stale indignity. Behind him, two executives in the row aft whispered, their conversation audible enough for Dorian's ears. He really made them scramble, didn't he? Good on him. The other replied, I heard they're overhauling sensitivity training. Bet they'll think twice about random security holds. Now, he allowed himself a small, private smile. The moment was not about his triumph. It was about the promise of better practices for every passenger, partner, and gate agent yet to face a snap judgment. As the flight cruised westward over clouds tinted gold by the setting sun, Dorian closed his binder and rested his hands on his lap. He traced the outline of the contract folder in his bag, feeling the embossed lettering beneath the leather. He thought of his mother sorting peaches in that fluorescent-lit back room, where assumptions had no place, only inspection, conversation, and care. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the cabin lights dimmed for rest. Dorian leaned back, closed his eyes, and allowed the steady hum of the engines to lull him. The ripple from Gate 17 had become waves. Corporate holds, policy revisions, training mandates. But the true transformation took root in the quiet. Moments the doubts questioned, the protocols refined, the lessons learned. N. Somewhere in Minneapolis, Cynthia Reyes convened her crisis team in a glassed conference room, pens poised over blank pages, ready to draft a new chapter in Horizon. Air's evolution, one born from a gate hold and a man's unwavering demand to be judged by his actions, not by his appearance. In the hush of the cabin, Dorian Brant slept peacefully, his presence a silent testament to the power of quiet conviction. Lessons at the summit. The conference ballroom buzzed with low-level conversation as Dorian Brant stepped from the side entrance and crossed the polished wood floor toward the lectern. The late afternoon sun filtered through high windows, casting golden shafts of light across the rows of crisp white chairs. Round him sat university researchers, logistics executives, sustainability advocates, and representatives from major grocery chains, each participant primed to dissect the next frontier of food systems. Yet an undercurrent of quiet curiosity pulsed through the room. Word of the morning's airport incident had spread among attendees who witnessed the delayed departure, and they wondered whether the keynote would address it. Dorian approached the podium, his posture erect yet relaxed, embodying the same composure that had steadied him at Gate 17. He gathered his notes, neatly organized index cards printed in clean, black type hand, offered a brief nod to the conference organizer. Then, with a single breath, he began. "Good afternoon," he said, voice resonant through the auditorium's acoustic panels. "Thank you for welcoming me to the Western Produce Sustainability Summit." A ripple of polite applause followed. He paused, scanning the audience, and for a moment, the room fell silent. "This morning, I arrived at JFK's Terminal 4, ready to share our collective progress on farm-to-fork initiatives. Instead, I was held at a gate, questioned, and treated as though I didn't belong in the premium lane of travel." He let the sentence linger, watching attentive faces. "I could stand here today and recount the indignity of that experience. But instead, I want to talk about assumptions, how they pervade every link in our supply chain, and how they can fracture the very systems we've spent decades building." The audience leaned forward. A hush replaced the light chatter. Dorian clicked a remote, and the screen behind him displayed a photograph. The empty, first-class line at Gate 17. A single red stanchion barrier and a distant silhouette framed by terminal lights. The image held a kind of stark clarity. Visual metaphor for isolation born of misjudgment. When a gate agent looks at you, Key continued, and fails to see your credentials, they're operating on assumptions shaped by unconscious bias. When a security officer stands by in silence, they're complicit in that misreading. And when a corporation freezes flights without context, they amplify the error across multiple layers of operation. He advanced the slide. A diagram traced the ripple effect from a single hold flag to delayed departures on 4 adjacent gates. That morning, one assumption triggered an operational cascade. It delayed flights, inconvenienced passengers, and exposed an unspoken truth. Even in highly regulated environments, human judgment remains a wild card. He shifted gears, tapping a button to reveal a different slide-a-lush photograph of a Midwestern farm at dawn, rows of corn stretching into misty fields. "Contrast that with our farmers," he said. "Their daily work depends on rigorous inspection and measured decisions. A grower doesn't assume the ripest melon by color. Alone, they test its weight, press its stem, and gauge its texture. They never skip that inspection because they know the consequences of a mislabeled crate." The audience nodded. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the seats. Dorian turned away from the screen and addressed the room directly. "In our quest for sustainable scalability, we must extend that same discipline to how we read people, policies, and processes. We can't afford shortcuts in sourcing, nor can we afford shortcuts in human understanding. When we bypass inspection whether of produce quality or our own biases, we compromise trust, efficiency, and ultimately, our shared goals. He clicked again, revealing a bar chart documenting spoilage rates before and after Brant Global Foods implemented seasonal rotations and insulated packaging on Horizon Air flights. The numbers spoke volumes. A 45% reduction in food waste, a 20% increase in passenger satisfaction scores, and a 30% drop in disposal costs. He acknowledged. But metrics alone don't capture the full picture. The real transformation happens when stakeholders at every level, farmers, distributors, corporate teams, ground staff, far trained to spot inconsistencies, question anomalies, and engage in open dialogue. A hand rose near the center aisle. Sustainability manager from a major grocery chain. Mr. Brant, she began, how do you integrate bias awareness training into your farm partner network? We're exploring similar initiatives with our suppliers, but have struggled to implement meaningful programs at scale. Dorian paused, offering her a nod of respect. Excellent question, he said, stepping off the podium slightly to foster a conversational tone. We start with storytelling. During onboarding, we invite farmers and field managers to share their own challenges, whether it's weather volatility, labor shortages, or logistical hurdles. By creating a safe forum for personal narratives, we build empathy across different roles. Then, we conduct interactive workshops where participants role-play scenarios like a mislabeled shipment or an unexpected audit to practice pausing, gathering facts, and avoiding snap judgments. Finally, we integrate bias awareness modules into our digital training platform, with periodic refreshers and anonymous feedback channels. He leaned forward. It's not a one-off lecture. It's a continuous dialogue that mirrors the iterative nature of supply chain optimization. A ripple of appreciative applause followed, and Dorian returned to the lectern. He pressed the remote again, displaying a final slide. A quotation by his mother, Eunice Brant, elegantly scripted beneath. A sepia-toned image of their humble produce stand. Excellence lives in the small details. Respect lives in how you see others. He let the words resonate. I learned that lesson sorting crates before dawn, he said softly. I learned it when I waited at a grocery register, speaking with customers one by one. And I relearned it this morning at gate 17. He paused, capturing every eye in the room. Our industry thrives on predictability, growing schedules, delivery timelines, consumer demand patterns. But at its heart, food distribution is a human enterprise, and humans are fallible. He glanced at the audience and delivered his closing thought. When we assume, we risk more than inefficiency. We risk dignity. So let us commit today and every day to inspect our processes, to question our biases, and to honor the humanity in every link of our chain. Silence reigned for a heartbeat before the room erupted in applause, warm, sustained, genuine. Attendees rose from their chairs, offering standing ovations that echoed like thunder through the high-ceilinged hall. Dorian inclined his head, allowing a small, reflective smile to surface. The applause wasn't for his smooth delivery or polished slides. It was for the shared recognition that meaningful progress demands more than technical fixes, demands empathy, patience, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths as he stepped away from the podium. Attendees approached with handshakes and words of gratitude. A young agronomist from Kansas whose farm had benefited from Brant Global's optimized communication system patted his shoulder. A university researcher presented him with a draft for a bias awareness study collaboration. Horizon Air's regional director slipped him a note of personal thanks. Each interaction validated the ripple he'd set in motion, far more enduring than the morning's disruption. Backstage, Dorian retrieved his garment bag and exchanged pleasantries with the organizer. Then, unobserved by the crowd, he closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. The summit's fluorescent lights faded into comfortable shadows. He thought of Gate 17 one last time, not as a place of embarrassment, but as a catalyst for transformation. A single hold had revealed hidden fractures. His calm response had sparked a corporate wave of policy change. And now, in this moment of collective resolve, the entire sustainability community stood ready to challenge its assumptions. He bent to zip his bag and, with a final nod to the bustling conference corridor, disappeared into the crowd. The summit would continue with panel discussions and networking sessions. But the chapter he'd authored this afternoon would linger long after the last handshake, a testament to the power of quiet conviction, disciplined inspection, and the simple act of seeing every person and every process with respect.